now and just let people in. So Rob, can you let participants in?
Yes, they're already attending, so they can see you.
Okay, excellent. Good afternoon or good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining us for the candidates and agents briefing. I can't actually see you all at the moment, so not quite sure who we've got, but for those that don't know me, I'm Martin Hamilton. I'm the Chief Executive here at Newcastle-under-Lyme Borough Council, and I'm also the returning officer for the two by-elections that we have coming up in Audley and Nutton. So this evening, I'm going to be taking you through a fairly extensive presentation about the various do's and don'ts of the by-election. And the intention really is to provide you with some useful information in the run-up to the and through your canvassing phase, etc. Take you right through to the count and thereafter. So I've got a deck of slides that I'm going to take you through, and in a moment I'm going to share that screen and run through those slides with you. So if you can just bear with me a second while I share the screen. I should also say we're recording this evening so that it will be available, make it available to candidates and agents who haven't been able to join us today. So I will just share the screen now and we can get underway. Right. So before I go, Rob, can you see the PowerPoint slides? Is it sharing okay?
Yeah, sharing just fine, Martin.
Yeah. And if I can just check that as I move to the next slide that it's moving okay.
So, yeah.
Yep, lovely. Excellent. Great. Thanks, Rob.
No problem.
Thanks. Right. So that's my IT support gone. So I'm now flying solo. So you must wish me luck. So as I say, I'm going to take you through this briefing for candidates and agents for the Audley and Nutton local by-elections that are coming up on the 7th of September. And I've got quite a lot that I'm going to run through with you. I'll do some introductions in a moment. I'll also take you through the election timetable, the various agents that can be appointed for the election. I will take you through aspects of registration, absent voting, some do's and don'ts around campaigning, and then I'll take you through to postal voting, and then I'll also be talking at some length about voter ID, because that's a new thing for us because it came in last May for the elections. We didn't have elections then, so this is going to be our first by-elections where we're actually complying with the new voter ID legislation. And I will then take you through the rest of the process through to the count, and also to talk about candidate spending. Okay, so as I said at the start, I'm the returning officer and also the electoral registration officer for Newcastle-under-Lyme Borough Council, and I'm also the council's chief executive. Now, a couple of other folk who you will likely come across in the course of the by-election, Barbara Beardwell, who is our new interim head of legal services and will be deputising for me should something untoward happen to me in the run up to this, and also Steph Price, who you may well have come across during the nominations phase. Steph is our elections manager and also a DRO, and then we have members of the election team that you will come across probably in the closing stages of the election and on the day: Annette Bailey, Chris Booth, and Julie Colclough. So you will, that's the team that we have together, the core team who will be running the election. I have overall responsibility for running the election. And then on election day, you will see many more folk as we turn out the presiding officers and the poll clerks and the counting staff, etc., in the evening. So there's quite a team that we put together for these two by-elections. In terms of the timetable is very much up and running now. We went live with the notice of election on the 2nd of August. So the next the next deadline, the election timetable is really quite a strictly adhered to set of deadlines. If it says 4 p.m. on a certain date, it really does mean 4 p.m. on a certain date. 10 past 4 will be too late. So the next deadline that we have coming up is the deadline for applications to register to vote. And that is on the 21st of August at midnight. So for those of you who will be out canvassing this weekend, you may well come across people who aren't registered to vote. So there's a fairly narrow window there for you to encourage them to do so. And I'll talk a little bit later on about how you would go about that. The deadline for any new postal vote applications or changes to postal vote applications is on the 22nd of August at 5 o'clock. So the sorts of things that you might encounter there are folk who perhaps have applied for a postal vote for parliamentary elections, but not for local elections, and then want to, if you like, extend their postal vote application to cover local elections, and so this one. So there may be a few things that you encounter there, and the deadline for that is the 22nd of August. And then a little later on the 30th of August, we have the deadline for new proxy votes, which for anyone who will be an absent voter and wants to use the proxy system. And then also on the 30th at 5 p.m, we have the deadline for applications for a voter authority certificate. Now this will be this is a new thing. This comes in as part of the voter ID, and I will go through in a little bit of detail later on in the presentation quite what that is about. As we push on through the timetable, then we will be on the 30th of August. We'll be publishing the location of polling stations, and then the day after that, on the 31st, is the deadline for you to appoint your counting agents and polling agents. So the counting agents are the folk that will be able to come along to the count and observe the count along with the candidates, and polling agents are the folk who can go into the polling stations and just sort of observe what's happening and ensure that you're content with how we're running the poll. Now, for those of you that haven't been through this process before, you may be thinking, well, that's an awful lot of agents, but I know past experience, you tend to use one agent will do lots of different jobs, but we need to know who is going to be doing the various agent roles by the 31st. And deadline for any lost or spoilt postal votes opens on the 1st of September. And then on the polling day itself, the polls will be open from 7 a.m. until 10 p.m. on the 7th of September. And then 5 p.m. on polling day, there's a deadline to apply to vote by proxy on grounds of medical emergency, reason of employment, or voter ID. Now, we've always had a opportunity for emergency proxies on medical grounds or reason of employment before. So that's where somebody's become ill after the deadline to get a regular proxy vote, or their employment or their service has required them to do something that means they're not available on election day. But again, that has happened after the deadline for regular proxies. But this time we also have this new category, which is for reason of voter ID. So this is, and as I say, I'll talk a bit more about voter ID in a little bit, but this particular thing, which hopefully will be few and far between, are for electors who have either lost, had stolen, or damaged to the point of no longer being usable their voter ID after 5 p.m. on the 30th of August. So 5 p.m. on the 30th of August being the deadline for a regular proxy. That the ID has been sent to someone else to prove their identity after the 5 p.m. on the 30th of August. So if you can imagine, if somebody has been, for example, applying for credit and has had to send off their driver's license and has not thought about the consequences at the poll. If they've done that after the 30th of August, they would be able to apply for one of these emergency voter ID, an emergency proxy for voter ID. Or if their ID has been applied for in the last 3 months but hasn't been received by 5 p.m. on the 30th of August and hasn't been declined, then they can also apply for one of these emergency proxies. Or the fourth category for these on voter ID is if someone's an anonymous elector and they don't have a valid anonymous elector's document. So fairly constrained set of criteria there, but with the new voter ID comes some new elements of the election that we will be running through. We will stop the replacement of lost and spoilt postal votes at 5 p.m. on polling day, and we will be able to alter the register to collect clerical errors until 9 p.m. on polling day, and then the deadline for election expenses is on the 12th of October. So it's a little while later. So in terms of the count, polling and postal vote agents, so you will be able to appoint agents to attend postal vote openings. The postal vote openings will be here at Castle House. You can appoint agents to attend polling stations and the count itself. So for anyone that you're appointing as a polling agent or a counting agent, we need to be given notice in writing of those people by the 31st of August. And the appointment of postal vote agents attending a particular session, that just needs to be made before the start of that session. And I'll come to those postal vote sessions a little bit later. And they're also in your guidance book. But the deadline for all of those for those are the 31st of August, and you can identify. So you can appoint one postal vote agent to come in and observe the postal votes. For the count itself, you can appoint one count agent, and you can also bring along a guest. And to observe in polling stations, you can appoint up to 2 polling agents per candidate. So it's not it's a constraint number. It's a set number that you can appoint for each of those. Now, one of the critical elements of the election is to make sure that anyone who's entitled to vote is able to vote. And I guess that in many ways the start for that is to make sure that people are on the electoral register. And as a candidate, you will be uniquely placed to encourage people who you come across in the course of the next few weeks. You can encourage them to register to vote. So if you do encounter folk who are not on the register, encourage them to register as soon as possible. The deadline for registration is the 21st of August, as I say, which is Monday, midnight on Monday. And the quickest way to get people to register is for them to go onto the gov.uk website, gov.uk/register to vote. Takes a couple of minutes to do. It's fairly swift. Now, one of the particular characteristics of these 2 by-elections is they fall in the middle of our annual canvass. So we will be sending out forms on the 23rd of August and also the 1st of September across the borough as part of the canvass. And those mail shots are already in process because we need to give the information to our printer ahead of time. So that may mean that some folk who register to vote before the 20th of August or before the 21st of August may still get a form from us subsequently inviting them to register to vote. And that's just a character of the fact that we are in the midst of the canvass. So If they do receive a form through the post, there's nothing we can actually do about that, but they will be able to identify whether or not they're registered by either whether they receive a polling card or they want to contact the elections office, preferably by email. Then we will be able to confirm for anybody that's in any doubt as to whether or not they're actually on the electoral register. For any more information about the canvass, there's information on our website about that, so you'll be able to pick up more information there. I'm going to run through now to absent voting, and this is the postal votes and the proxy votes and the emergency proxies that I mentioned earlier. So the first and I guess most significant part of this is people can only qualify to receive a postal or a proxy for the election if they are or will be registered in time to vote at the election. So the first gateway that folk need to pass through is to actually be on the electoral register. The deadline for requesting a postal vote is 5 p.m. on the 22nd of August. Deadline for requesting a proxy vote is 5 p.m. on the 30th of August. And as I ran through earlier, emergency proxies are open until 5 p.m. on polling day. The forms can actually come back to us by post or by email to the elections team, and the earlier that happens, the better. Now, one of the things that you may encounter in your work over the next few days is that you may have come across people who've actually got an application for a postal or a proxy, and they invite you to hand that back in for us. So there is a code of conduct around this, and you should always observe that code of conduct in relation to absent voting. So the code of conduct is to forward applications you receive to the electoral registration officer, so that's myself, within 2 working days of receipt. But the sooner that you can get those applications in, the easier it will be for us to process them. So on to the campaigning do's and don'ts. And these are all about just making sure that the integrity of the election is protected, and there's confidence in the election and the campaigning approach. So in terms of do's and don'ts, there's a lot of information on this on the Electoral Commission's website, but a couple of the critical issues here. Do in all your campaign material, including your website, use imprints that actually identify the name and address of the printer and the promoter, so that it's quite clear whose campaign material this is. Comply with planning rules in relation to any advertising, hoardings or large banners. Now, just to be clear on this, Staffordshire County Council don't allow the use of street lighting or street furniture for the display of election posters and material, and it doesn't give permission to anyone person to place election posters or other election material on street light columns, traffic signs or other street furniture. If anyone does put signs or posters up without their permission on those sorts of equipment, they are liable to be removed, and the relevant election agent will be charged the cost of their removal. So, I say there's just be alert to the planning rules. There's a lot of common sense, I think, in this, but I say there's more guidance on this on the Electoral Commission's website. And if you have put up outdoor posters, please make sure they're removed 2 weeks after the election. So when you're producing your materials, don't produce anything that looks like a polling card and therefore could confuse voters. And you can't pay people to display your adverts unless displaying adverts is part of their normal business. In terms of the council's use of council resources, we're very strict on this and make sure that council resources are not used for party political purposes during an election, and particularly during an election time. And one of the things that's particularly important here is for any candidates or agents who are serving councillors is to avoid using their Newcastle-under-Lyme Borough Council email address. This is the sort of thing that crops up from time to time, and we will always say, no, you mustn't use a Borough Council email address on campaign literature. There is a particular piece of code of conduct here around electoral registration and absent vote applications. So I'll go through this in a little bit of detail with you. If you are giving out any forms, please make sure that they conform to the requirements of the Electoral Commission and include the electoral registration officer's address on the return forms. So that's the address here at Castle House. Any unaltered applications need to come back to the ERO within 2 working days, as I mentioned earlier, and do make sure that electors understand the implications of applying for an absent vote. That, you know, if they've applied for an absent vote, they won't then be able to go and vote at a polling station. Don't encourage electors to redirect postal ballot packs to any other party, any other third party or individual, and do not encourage electors to appoint a campaigner as a proxy. So if you've got someone who's going to be unable to vote in person on the day and hasn't got a postal vote and needs to apply for a proxy, it is best that it's not a campaigner who acts as their proxy. In terms of the postal ballot packs, there are again strict rules here. Never touch a postal ballot paper, never observe electors completing their postal vote, and avoid handling or taking completed ballot papers or postal ballots from voters. So that's very much regarded as good practice at the moment. And from December this year, we're expecting that actually to be written into law, that candidates and agents won't be able to do that. So it's really about being able to be clear to everyone that their ballot paper, if they're posting a ballot paper, that there's no question that that ballot paper is not going to get to the right place to be opened and processed and counted. On polling day itself, you are able to put your messages to voters on polling day, including public spaces outside polling places themselves, but you won't be able to do campaigning inside polling stations, and you need to keep the access to polling stations and pavements around them clear so that voters can easily get in to vote. So as we approach polling day on the 7th of September, we will begin the process of opening and processing the postal votes, and the first postal vote opening session will take place on the 6th of September in a meeting room FF01 on the first floor of Castle House. So as I said earlier, for candidates and agents and postal vote agents that want to observe that, do please let us know before the 6th of September. We'll be processing postal votes on the 6th of September and also on the 7th of September. And our final opening session will actually be after the polls close at 10:15, starting at 10:15 in the Astley and Queen Elizabeth rooms in Castle House. The count itself will take place in the Astley and Queen Elizabeth rooms, and experience tells us that when the ballot boxes come back from the polling stations, there will be some postal votes that have been handed in at the polling stations, so we're able to process them at the count centre ahead of the count. So candidates and postal agents can attend those count sessions and observe what's going on and satisfy yourself that we are handling the postal votes appropriately. If you do come along to one of those, if you haven't been before, you will see a very structured process in place as the envelopes are opened and the ballots are verified, etc., and make sure that we have got are able to confirm that the postal vote has been signed by the person who is entitled to that postal vote. So there's opportunity to observe that. Now, voter ID, the new bit for us all here, I guess. We're now in a world where electors who vote in person at a polling station will be required to show a form of photo ID, an approved form of photo ID, before they'll be issued with a ballot paper. Now, the full set of what will be acceptable as a photo ID is available on our website, and information about this will also be on the polling cards. But those are things such as the UK passport, a UK driver's license, biometric immigration document, a blue badge, an older person or disabled person's bus pass. There's quite a range of photo ID that will be that will be acceptable. And interestingly, and I think this is the sort of thing that you might need to be aware of, because you may encounter people who are concerned that they only have expired ID. Expired photo ID is still acceptable as long as the photo is still a good likeness. If there is some discrepancy at the polling station, they may be required to provide further identity. So, for example, if they've recently got married and there's been a change of name or some such, so there may be some situations where we need additional proof at the polling station. If an elector doesn't have one of these approved forms of ID, and I think you'll see by the sorts of things that are available, that should be a relatively infrequent occurrence. They can apply for a free voter authority certificate, and electors can apply online through the gov.uk website, and they can also get paper applications if necessary, either off the Electoral Commission website, or they can contact the electoral offices here at Newcastle-under-Lyme. And for a voter authority certificate, they will need to provide a photograph, will need to be provided along with their paper application. If anybody comes along to Castle House for a face-to-face application, we can go through the application form with them and also take their photograph, and we then upload that through the government portal so that it goes through the same checks as someone applying directly. But as I said earlier, in order to obtain a voter authority certificate, an applicant must already be registered on the electoral register. Photos provided are encouraged to be passport style, and a full list of the requirements can be found on the application form. Now, voter authority certificates can only be used as identity at polling stations. They can't be used for any other purpose, and electors that get one of these are encouraged to keep them for future years. They're valid for 10 years. The temporary voter authority certificates will only be valid on the day of the poll for which they are issued. So they are produced where an applicant believes they may not receive the voter authority certificate that they've applied for by the election date. So, for example, if they've applied close to the deadline, and if anybody needs one of those, they need to really make contact with the elections team so that we can make that process. So this is what the voter ID, the voter authority certificates will look like. So a full certificate will look like this specimen. So it's got the name, it's got which electoral registration officer has issued it, the date of issue, and the recommended renewal date. You'll see that's 10 years, and then it has a fairly complicated and long number that is its certificate number, which is a unique number. And for a temporary one, it really has got a lot of the same information, except you will see that it is only valid on the day of the poll. So you'll see on that one, for example, it was 16th of January, 20th. Oh no, let's say, yeah. So it's valid for a particular day. The a temporary certificate should be. I think that photograph's actually wrong. So we'll come to polling day itself. Polling stations will be open at 7 a.m. We go to great pains to make sure that our polling stations are open bang on 7 o'clock, and if anybody wants to turn up at 7 o'clock to vote, they will be able to. The elections office itself will be open from 6:30 in the morning through to 10 o'clock at night for any queries relating to the administration of the election. And it also acts as a bit of a command center for us for any problems that arise at the polling stations. Hence, they're there and at the desks on the phones before the polling stations open. Any voter who is in the polling station or in a queue outside the polling station at 10 p.m. will still be able to apply for a ballot paper. And postal votes can be handed in at polling stations within the ward or delivered to the election office up until 10 p.m. And a person who is in a queue at a polling station at 10 p.m. and waiting to hand in a postal vote will be able to do so after 10 p.m. That's fairly well practiced process around queuing. So if you are minded to have tellers at the election, so these are the folk that you will see outside polling stations, keeping account of who's gone in and trying to get a sense of how folk have voted. They are not able to come into the polling station themselves. They do their work outside the polling station. And do have a look at the Electoral Commission guidance on that if you want more information. For this election, we will be improving the accessibility of our polling stations. So we're now under stricter guidance in terms of what's required of our polling stations. So all of our polling stations should be accessible for electors with disabilities, and we will have a range of equipment available for folk such as ramps, pencil grips, easy grip pencils, seating for people who will have difficulty standing for any length of time, magnifying glass, large print ballot papers, and for anyone who needs assistance, they will be able, staff can assist if required, or someone can bring in a family member or a friend or a carer, so long as they are aged 18 or over, to assist them in casting their vote. So that's part of the new drive to improve the accessibility at polling stations, which we are pleased to be able to meet, and we've gone through a process looking at the polling stations that we'll be using to make sure that we do have accessible, we do meet those accessible standards for them. So the counting of votes, we will be bringing the ballot boxes back to Castle House on the night of the ballot and on the night of the election. We'll be doing the count on the Astley and Queen Elizabeth II rooms, which are the two main meeting rooms downstairs in Castle House. And I would expect the count to get underway around about 10:30. That will give us time to get the ballot boxes back, to go through the process of checking that we've got all of the right information back from each of the polling stations, in terms of all sorts of paperwork that come back alongside the ballot boxes. As I mentioned earlier, from 10:15 we will also be starting to process the last of the postal votes that have come in. So for access to the count, closer to the time, we will be writing out to candidates and their agents. So candidates will be able to come along with 2 other people. One is their count agent, and they're also entitled to bring a guest. And we need you to identify those folk. We will write out in advance to you and provide wristbands. So when you come to the count, please bring the letter and your wristband so that you get access to the count. The counts are not public events, so we do restrict who can come. Accredited press can come. The Electoral Commission can send staff or registered observers. And my convention over many elections now has been also to invite the group leaders and deputy leaders from the local authority and also the local MP to observe the count, so that they can all see that see the process that we go through and be satisfied. And also the accredited press can come along to the count. At the count and on the night, I will give a much more detailed breakdown of this, but very broadly, the process that we go through at the count is first of all, there's the final postal vote opening that will be happening. We then do what's called verification. So this is a process where we check that the number of ballot papers that have been returned to the count centre is the same as the number of ballot papers that we expected to be returned to the count centre based on the ballot paper accounts from each of the polling stations. And that is if you like, one of the very first parts that we need to make sure is right, that we have the right number of votes there to count. We then go through the process of counting the ballot papers. We haven't finalized the setup of the room, but you'll be able to get reasonably close to the counting to be able to observe what's happening. We will either have double tables so that you've got a little bit of space between yourselves and the count staff, or we may use screens that we bought during COVID times that actually allow you to get a little bit closer to the count staff, but still be able to let them get on with their job unhindered. So we'll in the coming days we will work out the exact layout, but you'll be able to get a good view of the count and be clear as to what's happening. If there are any ballots that it's not entirely clear what the voter's intention was, I will adjudicate on those as returning officer, and I will do that in the presence of the candidates and agents so that they can understand my thinking on those. We will count the ballot papers that have been returned, count the votes for each candidate, and it is of course a first past the post election, so there will be in each case one candidate who receives more votes than the others and will be appointed. So for the successful candidate, after the declaration of result, the successful candidate will be issued with an information pack which will inform them of the steps that they need to take straight away. So that will be, for example, making contact with my office in order to sign the acceptance of office, etc. And we will do some induction work with the successful candidate. After that, we will all go home for the evening, because by that stage it will have been a very long day. And then the next significant element is where we get into the candidate spending. So there's a limit on expenses, which is £806 plus 7 pence per elector. That is the limit for candidate spending at the election. I would encourage you to look at the Electoral Commission's guidance on this, so you can see what expenses are defined as used for the purposes of the candidate's election during the regulated period. And management and return of the candidate spending is the responsibility of the election agent, but candidates should also keep an eye on this because they also need to be clear that what has been returned to us is appropriate. You need to keep receipts for any expenditure over £20. And one of the things just to be clear on is none of these expenses are reclaimable from the council. This is expenses that that you will incur, but they're not in any way refundable or claimable off the council. Returns are due to us 35 calendar days after the election, so that will be the 12th of October. There are samples of what returns look like on the Electoral Commission website, and it is important that you get returns back to us. It's a criminal offence, and as I said, no funding will be reimbursed. If we, just to be clear, if for any reason we don't declare the result until after midnight on election day, then everything will roll forward a day, and the expense return will be the 13th of October. But hopefully, with just the two by-elections, we would be able to manage that before midnight. Finally, then, for you, a range of contacts that will be useful to you. The election office here, you've got their phone number there, and also their email address. You may be interested in the Highways Department at the Staffordshire County Council. There will be an email account for what's the election SPOC, the single point of contact at Staffordshire Police, who can help with anything that you're concerned about from a policing perspective, and also, of course, the Electoral Commission themselves. I would really encourage you to spend a little bit of time on the Electoral Commission website and familiarise yourselves with the various rules and whatnot that the Electoral Commission have in place. And that is my run through for this evening. I don't know whether there's any. I'm just trying to. Don't know whether anyone has any questions that they wanted to ask. I think if you do, if you can put up a hand. Nope. Okay. In that case, I say we're going to upload this onto the election section of the council's website, so you'll be able to watch this again if needs be, or if any of your colleagues haven't been able to attend this evening and want to see it, they can also download it and watch the recording. A lot of this information will also be in your candidates and agents booklet, but again, we'll have this and the PowerPoint up on the website so that you're able to peruse it at your leisure. And I look forward to seeing you all on the 7th of September at the count. Okay, thank you all very much for attending this evening.